Hi everyone, and welcome back to WEFTEC Live. I'm Christy Murphy, your host today, and I'm joined by Caroline Samberger, and she is the Principal Process Engineer at Stantec and a leading voice in the field of the circular water economy. Caroline, thank you for joining us today. We're real excited to visit with you, and we have a live audience who are here to listen to. So I wanted to go back to one of WEF's strategic goal is leading the transformation to the circular water economy. And just last spring, we hosted and held our first annual WEF Circular Water Economy Summit. And yesterday, you hosted a learning exchange here at WEFTEC on the topic. And what did you hear from the attendees? Did they come up after the presentation? What was the conversation like?
There were lots of things that we discussed about, so I think there were different levels of understanding of the circular economy, and so I was just starting from a basic level. But I think the most interesting part of the discussion was when we came to talk about the indicators of that we need to use to implement and measure the progress to circular economy. And I think we didn't really have enough time, although the session was very long, but they were actually all very excited and started talking a lot about that. And I had to interrupt them to be able to finish the session. So it's like kind of an unfinished conversation, but which should be actually ongoing for a while, because it's actually something which we need to sort out, address before we are able to implement circular economy.
What is the definition of the circular water economy, and how does it differ from sustainability?
So sustainability, if you look at the definition, is actually a concept or sustainable development is a concept which is supposed to address the problem of keeping some resources for future generations. And circular economy is actually a tool to implementing this sustainability. And there are lots of definitions of circular economy, but let's say, to keep it simple, there are actually three principles. The first one is actually to recycle products and keep the products in the economy for as long as possible. The second one is regenerate nature. And the last one is, this is the first one, reduce waste at source. So we should actually avoid creating waste at source rather than trying to actually recycle. So the first action is reducing.
The CWE is really gaining in attention. There's been a lot of talk here and conversations at WEFTEC. Why do you think it is receiving so much attention?
I think because people are starting to realize now that we are going to be short of resources. Let's say we are currently using 100% of our freshwater resources for the planet to still be, healthy despite the number of people on it. And by 2030, we'll be in deficit of fresh water of about 40 to 60%. And so people are starting to realize that, on top of the fact that they are very sensitized to CO2 emissions and greenhouse gases, which is another problem. They're all linked, but people are starting to realize we are going to lack water. And some people are already in stressed water areas. Probably half of the population is going to be actually in water-stressed areas by 2025. So it's just like tomorrow.
It is tomorrow. Things move quickly. You're doing a lot of research in data, trying to measure circular water economy. Tell us about that and why that's so important.
So first, it's actually, I'll start to explain why it's important. It's important because if we don't have any way to measure actually how we will have achieved circular economy, then we won't be able to know where we are, right? So we need to basically have tools to be able to measure where we want to get and how we are going to get there and whether we've actually reached our goals. I just need to point out that circular economy, despite its name, is not really totally circular, because if you think logically, there will always be remaining wastes that we won't be able to get rid of. But the point is actually to reduce this amount of waste to a minimum, as minimal as possible, but it won't be completely circular. So the world is a bit misleading.
Are you identifying certain industries right now where you'd like to continue or begin researching and bringing in that data to measure?
Yeah, there are actually different industries which are consuming lots of water, such as the food industry, food and beverage industry, the energy sector. So these areas, they need to actually try to implement things to reduce the amount of water they are using in the first place. Because circular economy, as I was saying earlier, the first principle is actually to reduce. To be more concrete, if you take circular economy applied to your phone, for example, reducing your waste would mean that the phones are actually designed in the first place to minimize waste, so that when you don't use them anymore, you just take them apart and you can build new phones based on the components within your own phone. And this is the first step to circular economy. And the next step then is, if you can't use these components, then you will try to recycle them and use them to something else that they were not planned for in the first place. And the last step in circular economy is actually really recycling and then disposing of the waste which are left.
At Stantec, you haven't always been focused on the circular water economy. Tell us what you've done before, and then now why you're so passionate about studying circular water economy and contributing to it, and really to sustainability and for the world.
Yeah, so I started working actually in water. For about 6 years I was doing incineration and flue gas treatment. And then, but I always wanted to actually work in oil and gas, which is probably not the best sector to work in if you really want to be sustainable. And I spent 15 years in oil and gas, and I was actually a bit fed up of the way they are actually, looking at the environment. It's just like a, ticking the box exercise. If you want to be able to build a facility, then you need to tick. Have like an environmental impact assessment, which is like lovely, and you're showing that you're reducing your impacts. But that wasn't really enough for me. So I started actually trying to find ways to get out of this oil and gas sector. And I started actually reading on, first, because I was in the energy, I started reading and learning about renewable energy. And from there, obviously, when you want to be renewable, energy and CO2 emissions are not the only concerns. Then you use lots of water when producing energy. So that led me back to water. And I did many more research and work to actually understand circular economy better.
And once you're able to measure actually the circular water economy and what industry is doing, even what normal human beings are doing in their daily life, when do you think you'll be able to measure that data? And when will you have collected enough to actually continue your research?
Well, currently, we are trying actually to build a tool to be able to assess circularity of water systems. And it proves to be quite difficult because there are, as you can imagine, there are actually lots of possible indicators that we could use to measure circularity. But the problem is we have too much. They are not necessarily the good indicators, or the data is not available at water utilities. So because we are not measuring it or recording it. So all of that is actually what makes it very difficult to create a tool to be able to give answers. So we are looking for water utilities and people wanting to share data with us to be able to actually, make a more solid model. But there is not really any timeline. As soon as possible, we will try. But yeah, there is like a model which is already you know, built, but we need to bring more data to it in order to test it, basically.
And when we were talking earlier, you're looking down the road. It's not going to happen tomorrow. You said 5 to 10 years is the time level when you start making an impact, and people begin to really accept and buy into the circular water economy.
Yes, there are actually lots of barriers to implementing circular economy. And they are kind of obvious, but they need to be addressed. So there are like technological barriers. There are some technologies which are in development, such as the pyrolysis of biosolids, but they are not totally proved commercially, which could have some nice impact on the economy and the environment. So this is what we call technological readiness levels are not actually very high. There are also some political and regulatory issues, you know, like the lack of funding to actually promote circular economy, the lack of regulations or some conflicting regulations as well sometimes. There are some social and cultural barriers as well, because people may not be ready to actually buy circular economy products, or they don't know about circular economy. And if I come out of the water sector, if you go to a shop and you want to buy some shoes, there is at the moment no label telling you how circular such or such shoes is. So how would you actually make a decision, a conscious decision on buying the circular ones when you've got actually conventional ones which are less expensive? So all of that is actually a very complicated topic to actually solve.
You're very passionate about what you do. Why did you get into water? And tell us just a little bit about your passion for it.
I think it's just, as I said before, because I was in the oil and gas and I was thinking I'm not really doing anything which is useful, although I was helping produce energy we need. But I was thinking, okay, I'm actually only destroying the environment. I mean, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but they are doing good things as well, and they are trying to transition to clean, renewable energy. But that wasn't necessarily enough for me, and I thought I was a bit not as useful as I could be. So that's why I changed, and I carried on into water rather than staying where I was.
Well, lots of encouraging words from you today, lots of work ahead, and we want to thank you for being with us and sharing your knowledge, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you. And thank you again for joining us here on WEFTEC Live.
Thank you.
We will have many more segments today. We hope that you tune in, and have a great day, everyone, and thank you, studio audience, for being here with us today. Thank you again, Caroline.